Okay, it's episode 12 of Incoming Aggression. And in case anyone's going back through the VODs later on, you might wonder yourself, well, what is episode 12 about? Like, you don't know the chronology of it, so I'll just start out by saying that, okay, you know, maybe you don't know the Froskurinn actually, but June 6th is a popular day in the West because it represents D-Day. It was the day that, like, the Allies sort of won the war against the Nazis. And it was when in Europe, you know, Normandy landings, like all that stuff took place on June 6th. So it's traditional in England and America. Sometimes like there's a celebration of this day and what it represents and, you know, this sort of stuff. So I'm gonna just say, even though it's not actually this day today, because we're doing this show and our mind's going back to MSI, I feel like for me, there's going to be a similar day and it's going to be the 8th of May because that was the day that TSM was eliminated in the group stage of the MSI. And you know that like famous meme, like, please, there's only so erect I can get. Like, that kind of summed up that day for me in many ways. Like, the euphoria, and not even just because it has EU in it, you know? Like, you can't spell euphoria without EU, Froskurinn, but the euphoria that went over me, there's also a 4 in there, and TSM lost 4 games, so it all works out, you know? The euphoria that went over me, kind of like the realization that I actually felt like Albert Camus, you know, because there's this famous saying he had that said something like, it was like an epiphany he had in life, where he realized that even in the midst of like something like in the midst of like of the darkest winter, he realized the eternal summer that lived within him. You know, it's like that no matter how dark it got, like actually hope and like the good of the world is generated internally, and it will always overcome. So it doesn't matter if it seems like it's at its darkest. You know, like when it's at its darkest, Froskurinn, that's when the dawn is at its nearest. You know, it's just about to come. So it doesn't matter if TSM wins IEM, they win NALCS. You think, oh, all hope's lost. You know, Europe looks like trash. That's the moment when, you know, the cavalry arrives, Gandalf the White comes over that hill, you know, the Rebel Alliance blows up the Death Star. Listen, there's a lot of narratives in history. The dragon is slain by King George. Like, there's all these things can happen that can save you in that moment. And so I feel like that was our day when, that was the day, not to use any hyperbole, because I hate that sort of stuff, you know. That was probably the day, I'd say, when Western League of Legends was saved and actually given a chance at redemption, where it could become something good, something beautiful, something worthy of being loved. You know, not just despised and scorned. So, how did you feel about the MSI tournament? That's good. I feel like you had a different window into it on me. You know, you didn't really give a fuck about that NA team, right?
I can't say the TSM was my number one priority. I will say that they were in my prediction of the entire MSI tournament, they were the thing that I got most wrong, because I said that I think TSM has a better chance at winning, although it would be an upset, than they did at getting crushed. And obviously, I was completely wrong there.
I mean, I think that's a crazy statement. Not because, by the way, not because now people are going to be like, haha, because you think TSM will get crushed. No, here's the thing, I didn't. Like, I also thought, to me, yeah. I thought TSM's definitely going to make the semis. Like, they have a better chance than Fnatic, okay? I'm like everyone else I know that thought that, okay? That's like an obvious and piece of analysis. But I think it's a crazier statement to suggest that they had a better chance of winning than losing. Like, no, there was still a big gap to them losing, but there was a much bigger gap to them fucking winning the tournament, winning 2 best of 5 for a score. Let's get real right here.
I just didn't think they'd get crushed by everyone. The only team that they didn't beat was the international wildcard team. Like,
yeah, tell me about it.
That, and I don't think they had any idea how they lost. And of course, I'm not like a big TSM person. Like, I don't religiously watch all their games, but just in watching them through MSI and kind of doing some past VOD review, because I had used them as a teaching tool in their lane swaps, just because they do it so well, to teach the Dignitas EU. And this is what I've come to understand about TSM. And this is my theory about what the hell just happened to them. TSM excels in a lane swap, and I almost think that they need to do it, and they need to do it for a very specific reason. It's not Dyrus. Like, a lot of people will think, oh, it's the top laner, but Dyrus gets dove like every single time. It's Lustboy. They need to do a lane swap because they need to free up Lustboy to roam. Because Bjergsen, he's a 1v1 mid laner. He's never going to fucking leave that middle lane. I mean, obviously there are games when he'll roam down, but it's not what he's known for. He's known for sitting 1v1 in the mid lane and just smashing his opponent. And on this tournament specifically, he was like put on really immobile champions. I mean, he had like his famous Cho'Gath game against Westeros Fizz. Everyone's like, huh, that's an interesting pick. But Lustboy, if Lustboy doesn't roam, if the lane swap doesn't happen, and it's not like Lustboy, as I like to say, like leading Santorin by the dick into the enemy jungle or making like these crazy plays, nothing happens. Like Dyrus will get dove 5 times and Santorin will be like, this is a sweet raptor camp.
What I feel like actually is, so Santorin actually does remind me of someone who's mastered jungling in solo queue, because and this is a bit of wisdom for the noobs out there. Well, if you're the player who's playing in solo queue and you're playing top lane or bot lane or whatever, whichever lane you're playing, okay, say you're feeding, like actually you take a stupid risky 1v1 and you lose it just by a little bit and the guy's like a little bit of health, but then he gets away to the fountain and your jungler didn't dive him, and then second time you come back and you have that stupid mentality of like, oh, I'm going to get it all back, I'm going to kill him now. You go in again, he kills you, now the guy's 2-0 up on you in lane. That's when people start going apeshit in solo queue. Like they start saying like, come on jungler, come and gank him now. Like you've got to gank him, he's too far ahead. The actual conventional wisdom for how to play in solo queue is actually that's the lane you don't gank. You now abandon that lane and say, right, if one of my other lanes is ahead or even, my aim instead, because for obvious reasons I'm way more likely to get the gank off if I come, is to get that lane ahead, and even though this one's lost up here, try and just snowball the other one and we're going to carry the game that way. I feel like Santorin's mastered that quality. Okay, he didn't manage to do it well in this tournament because he couldn't get the ganks off elsewhere, but he knows like once Dyrus is fucked like that, he's like, that's like basically if it's a sci-fi movie, Dyrus is in the part of the spaceship that like has gotten some like debris has torn it open and like it's just open to the vacuum of space and he's running out of air. So what Santorin does is he realizes he can't actually save Dyrus and get him back into the other part of the ship, so he presses that button that like cordons off that area like doo, 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 doo. And then when it goes down, Dyrus is like, please Santorin, we're teammates, please, and then Santorin presses that button that just like jettisons it into space and like leaves it behind, and he's like, the rest of the TSM ship must go, the mothership must just go on, to the planet evil team, I don't know, wherever they live. So yeah, the planet Baylife. I fucked up the joke there, obviously, didn't I? Yeah, so that's how I feel about the way Santorin treats Dyrus in the joke. But actually, I agree with you, by the way. When I watched these games, I didn't think Dyrus was like unusually bad or anything. He was okay. He's always, here's the problem, because by default TSM fans have often gone in on him and shit on him, and he doesn't have like a flashy style of play. I always used to call him an underrated player, but I actually realized going into this tournament, in a sense he's underrated because like a lot of people underrate him. But then the problem is the people who his fans massively overrate him. Like they always try to make out like he's fucking, if you talk about greatest top laners, you've got to go like Shy, Flame, Dyrus, Reaper. Like whoa, one of those is not like the others there, mate. Like one of those is only in that list because he played like 5 straight years. The others are getting way more done in like 6 months. You know what I mean? Like they go too far the other way. So I'm not hating on him in that sense. But I think he's a competent player. I definitely don't think he has a problem in that team. His problem is that the team, for some bizarre reason I don't really understand, gives him 0 priority. Now there's the key quality, 0. Not as in, like here's the thing, in every team when we understand how carry threats work and who you're going to put gold onto and attention, some people aren't going to be the focal point. But I can't think of any top team, think of all the teams at this tournament, any top team in their region who give a player 0 priority. And then do stupid stuff like put him on a carry champion. Like, well, that's going to be a recipe for disaster. Like, okay, think of Cora 1 in the old EDG, where in theory, they had clear love, so he was never going to get any ganks at 15 minutes in top lane. Like, we all know that, okay? We're talking about the Name EDG here, Froskurinn. But either he would just play super safe champions, so you knew he could just go even and wait for the team fight, or he would at least get the odd bit of a gank, if he was getting dove. Like, it's not like he had nothing, he just had to survive on his own in the fucking wilderness against wild beasts and animals. He wasn't like fucking north of the wall, like Samuel Tali or something, trying to survive with a baby. Like, what do you think of this? What do you think of this, Dyrus?
I actually thought that a lot of people were saying that Dyrus was the fault of TSM and Dyrus was the problem. And obviously, I think you hit the nail on the head. This guy's getting dove. I remember watching the ETG game and they dove Dyrus 3 times in like the first 10 minutes. And the first time I was like, oh, that happened, Santorin. And Santorin was looking for the dive top on Koro, but for whatever reason, of course, the camera wasn't there. But on the minimap, we saw him go up there and nothing happened. I was like, okay, maybe they just didn't get their gank off. The second time I was like, huh. And then the third time I was like, oh my god, and nothing's happening. And what's crazy too is this, I think, was the game that they played Bard. So you have to think, again, this all goes back to my theory that Lustboy is like the primary pace setter for TSM, and when they excel and when they succeed, it's because Lustboy is helping Santorin with his roams. Lustboy was playing Bard because obviously there was no chance that they were ever going to make it into the semis at this point, so like why the fuck not play Bard? But Bard is designed for roaming. Like, if you're gonna play that champion, you have to roam, and he just sat in the lane. And I think TSM's number one problem, and not to like point individually like, oh, Santorin didn't gank, or Dyrus always overextends and he dies to pathing or whatever, and Bjergsen's not playing, you know, the correct matchup. He's not playing a mobile champion. He's not playing the hard carry. He kind of pussied out and went for the AoE mage. Lustboy just needs to roam. They need to free him up, and they need to get him going with Santorin. Either that, or they need to learn how to play in a standard 2v2. I think that there's a reason why TSM excelled in the lane swap.
But I mean, as we go on, one of the storylines I'd outlined was that, here's the thing, it's not that if Clearlove did well at this tournament, that would then make him the best jungler ever. It's the other way. I actually build it as, because the jungle talent was so weak, it's if he didn't do really well, that would be kind of like that'd make you ask questions like, what's going on? So actually, in that sense, you do have to put that against Santorin. That again, here's the thing, when Amazing had to go to Worlds, he had to play fucking Dandy in a best of 5. Santorin wasn't playing Dandy. He wasn't playing some godlike play. He wasn't even playing Insec, if you remember. Amazing had to play Insec as well. He was playing, played clearly in one game, but aside from that, the talent of players he's playing at jungle were reasonably weak, and a lot of them only maybe, well, I mean, they were okay, but they weren't. The whole point is they're not of the godlike stars. So I do think it is worth pointing that out. But anyway, let's move on beyond TSM, because first of all, there'll be summoning insight. Secondly, this is incoming aggression. We don't give a fuck about wildcard regions and all that. We care about China, okay? That's what this show is all about. So let's start with EDG's positioning. So in the group, they beat up AHQ first, and I actually feel like the order of how things happened in the group is part of what made the overall storyline so funny in terms of TSM losing, but also so interesting in terms of how the rest of the tournament developed. Because since EDG beat up AHQ, and it wasn't a total blowout, it had some reasonably... AHQ were in the game to a degree. Because it was like that, it made everyone think like, oh, I guess EDG is like really strong, and AHQ, like, not everyone was underrating AHQ obviously and thought they wouldn't be able to do anything. What was the first meeting like them between in the group? Not the semi-final. What was the group meeting like, do you think?
Well, in the early game, EDG probably played their weakest early game in that set. They tried to gank bottom lane. I think this is when they had an Urgot against the Kalista, and they tried to gank Kalista early, and they just got smashed in like a level 4 engagement. I was like, if that had been against any team, SKT, TSM, Fnatic, that would have been punished so much harder. But because it was AHQ, it was kind of let slide, and they lost their early game dominance. And then they effectively just solo or safely farmed Clearlove's Sejuani up. And then as soon as he was level 6, level 7, and they had that ultimate, that's when EDG came out and just started smashing AHQ. So I think the pace of the game was much slower than some of the standard other games throughout the series. But if you want to talk about like power spikes and like correct moments to strike and things like that, EDG, they screwed up the early game because they tried to fight when they weren't strong. As soon as they realized that, they took a step back. Then they just rolled over AHQ. So yeah, like the action, because it was kind of like slow pace, and then like suddenly all of these kills and all of this action. If you just watch the team fighting in that game, there's nothing AHQ can do. They just get completely outmaneuvered. Which I found out that AHQ and EDG actually scrim a ton. So they were very used to each other.
I assume they both speak Chinese, etc., so they can communicate. So here's the thing about that game is that you mentioned, Deft played Urgot in it. And I noticed that that's actually, because it's a meta pick, Deft is playing it now. Like, he plays it a few times. He's even played it in the finals before in LPL. And he played it as this tournament went on. Everyone always complains when I say this, but I don't really understand why people make out like Urgot's some like OP champion. Like, I understand it is within the meta, but I've seen so many really good AD carries play that champion and just do average or even have bad games in it. It feels like to a way bigger degree. Like, say someone like Impoke, who's like a monster on Kalista. If you put him on Kalista, he might not win every game, but it's going to be a very low percentage he'll do badly on. If you put Deft on Jinx or something, then again, he's going to do really, really well in the majority of the games, It feels like there's a way higher percentage of games on Urgot that these really beast AD carries, like, they don't know what they're doing, or maybe the fact that they're used to being like damage dealers and they're not doing like the DPS all the time. What do you think it is about this champion?
Well, the idea of Urgot is that he's an anti-carry, that he's not a hyper carry, so he's not going to bring a ton of damage. And a lot of problems that teams run into, especially when they draft Urgot, and this is the problem that SKT ran into in the Game 5 against EDG, is they first picked Urgot, which means that they had to pick LeBlanc. They couldn't have gone Lulu because an issue is that so many teams will draft low damage dealers. And I mean, there's kind of like two ways to do it. You either have to have a hyper carry in there and you're using Urgot as a counter, and he does work really well against someone like Kalista because he can lock onto her and he has such incredible range, so her passive doesn't mean as much for her. But the other side of that is that Kalista's going to just brutally harass him in lane, especially early, because he needs his tier, he needs his levels. He's not a lane dominant champion. At a point he will become it, but he needs to ramp up before that time. So levels like 1 through 4, Kalista's going to have a heyday, especially her level 2. So you either go like a super tanky composition where it's just you can't kill us, or you have to bring like maybe, I would probably even say like a triple threat composition. So you're using Urgot as almost like a second pseudo tank, so you don't need to bring someone like a Maokai. I would say like maybe like a Rumble, Urgot, some sort of hyper carry in the mid lane, you would be okay. But so many teams draft incorrectly and they just don't have any damage.
So when you have an Urgot, basically, like you're either going to need like a super burst mid laner or something, or like a carry top laner.
Yeah, I would say.
I mean, EDG had this in this game. They had the Hecarim was on Koro, and he obviously went ham. Right, so after that, EDG played SK Telecom, which is obviously a very highly anticipated game because, I'm sure like myself, a lot of people were thinking this could be a preview of the final. Mm-hmm. But actually, here's the thing. This first meeting was underwhelming in a bunch of regards. First of all, it was like, oh my god, Faker versus Pawn? No, EasyHoon versus Pawn. Like, do you think that they purposely played EasyHoon in the group, knowing themselves that this could very likely be the final, maybe we want to trick them or not give them an idea of what a Faker comp would look? What do you think the reason is they took EasyHoon in here?
Well, I think that there's two reasons. First and foremost, if they decided, like watching how everything mixed out and Koma decided that he wanted to start Faker, then obviously if you beat him with EasyHoon, that means that they have no prior experience on what it's going to be like if Faker's there. So you can create an edge. Secondly, I actually do think that EasyHoon, stylistically in the current meta, is a better matchup. He dumpster Pawn. He dumpster Pawn every single time. Just like completely dominated him in lane, outplayed him on the champions. I was really impressed with EasyHoon, and I know you're like a big Faker supporter, and I'm a huge Faker supporter as well. Like, I do agree that the fact that Faker can just single-handedly carry a game is astronomical to your success, like a player that can do that. But as far as meta is concerned and picks and just outperforming EasyHoon dumpster Pawn. I don't know if you watched like his Cassiopeia lane phase, and then when EasyHoon beat him on the reverse matchup, I was like, damn.
Okay, but in this game, this was the group stage game where he played Vlad, and obviously he was very good here as well.
What happened?
Pawn chose to play Lulu.
What happened is that, to my understanding, the Korean players were scared. They wanted to try a passive scaling composition against SKT. Pawn and Deft specifically asked this of the team. It wasn't their initial strategy going in. Aaron agreed. They got to pick their own champions. So the Koreans picked who they wanted to play, Tristana and Lulu, and they got smashed. And then after it, everyone was like really upset. Most of the players like ran away to the room, but Clearlove decided to stick around for the press conference, and he just said, "We will not do that again."
These fucking pussies. See, that's one of those moments where you need to have a coach who's like that guy out of the Cobra Kai in the Karate Kid, who's like, no mercy. Like, we don't back down from this shit. We're going in. The opposite Pawn. You're picking like fucking, I mean, what would you even play this now? You're picking a Zero or something, you know. We're going ham now. It's none of that pussy shit here. But instead, they let him have the easy way out. I guess in the end, as long as they were going to get out of the group in first or third, it wouldn't really have mattered. That's the thing with the group you have to realise. SKT or EDG would have had some more than one upset basically to face each other in the semis, which is really the worst scenario for them. Like one of the big problems with this tournament was if either SKT or EDG was dominant, then 2 plays 3 anyway. So it doesn't matter if you're second or third technically, as long as one of the other Asians is the number 1. So actually, in that sense, I could see why Koma in this game, for example, gambled on taking EasyHoon, because if he loses it, it doesn't necessarily give away too much. Okay, so that was day 1. So day 2 for EDG, we start out with a game that wasn't particularly hyped, which was going to be EDG versus Fnatic, because a lot of people were thinking, come on, EDG is very easily going to win this game. Isn't that what happened? Didn't we learn in this game, Froskurinn, that like you might be able to get away with steal back if everything goes right for your team. If Huni carries, if Featherman's on a champion is going really well, if they group early, if they've got him on like a decent right-click champion, all this stuff has to go right. If so, then you can cover steal back's weaknesses, right? You won't have any issues. You can make it work at least. But in this game, we saw what happened when he put steal back against the best player in the world at AD carry. What do you think of that characterization?
Was this the game where Deft?
This is the game where Deft had Kalista and went 15-1 to 10.
Oh my god. So here's the crazy thing. Deft isn't known as a Kalista player. He played it in the LPL, but go back and watch this games, you're like, damn, he should just not play this champion. And then the plays when Febiven, I'll never forget this. This needs to be a highlight. In the top red buff, when Febiven, EDG pick like an awful fight, like their tank line is completely separated and it's just Mako and Deft and Febiven's down as Zed, and he jumps onto Deft and then Deft EB like QSS's and then uses, he flashes over the mini golem wall and then he Qs back over it. He does like this crazy combo where he fate calls Mako back into the team fight. Kalista Thresh, probably the highest skill cap in the game of just all the possible things that you can do, and the fact that Mako and Deft just dumpstered Fnatic with this combo when they don't speak the same language is incredible to me. Like, Mako's a rookie. I know that Fnatic has a ton of rookies on their team, but Mako's a rookie with a language barrier, and Deft isn't dominant in his lane phase, and I believe that this was the game where he tower dove and killed someone under tower, so I mean, people were kind of expecting, people always call Fnatic the Chinese team, and I think this game really underlined the difference between just like a team fighting team and a Chinese team.
That's also the problem, though, with when you characterize Deft, because unfortunately, people always want these simple, like they want things to be like in a very simple box. Okay, they don't want it to be like a lot of nuance to describing, because then it's hard to remember. And it's hard to like, how would this match up against that? It's very simple if you say, oh, this guy, yeah, he's really passive early in his laning phase, isn't that good, but he's good at team fighting later. You have to realize part of why he's good at team fighting. Remember, because if he's got a passive lane phase, he's not a monster in the lane. It's not like he's snowballing and he's just got all the kills and all the items and he just overpowers you. He's good at team fighting later because he's a fucking mechanical monster and he has sick positioning. That's the key thing, though. When he has those sick mechanics, it means that when he's not against someone, usually the reason he's passive is because oftentimes he's playing someone who their whole style is, their strength as an AD carry is they're like a bully laner who wants to fight in the lane, and that would be playing into their hands, okay. But he's actually very, very strong mechanically himself, so he's definitely capable, if he wants to, of playing all these mechanical champions, of being aggressive early, etc., as you occasionally have seen him do sometimes in LPL if it's the right matchup. Just that he doesn't, okay, and obviously philosophy-wise, he's not the guy who buys into that as an aspect, you know. I wonder in this game, bearing in mind Kalista isn't really a pick that they normally go with, if they just didn't want to give much away in this game with the pick, because again, like, here's the thing, this was a game where again he could have picked Jinx if he wanted. Steelback was going Lucian, there was no Jinx ban. I mean, people very rarely are going to ban it. He could have gone something like Jinx. I feel like in this game they thought they didn't need to, they could just pick whatever there.
Deft did say that he had also been practicing his Kalista. He admitted that the champion took him much longer to learn and he didn't feel as comfortable on it, just because it's not his style of champion. But I definitely think there was an aspect of trying to hide things. And they did surround him and flank him with everyone else's comfort champions. The fact that Mako was playing Thresh, so it wasn't like everyone was kind of experimenting or sandbagging.
And it is worth pointing out, okay, since the hype for Febiven's going to be very high, justifiably so, he had an incredible series against the best player of all time and had some great single individual outplays, he had some very good games on multiple champions. It is worth pointing out that he was playing Zed in this game, Pawn was on LeBlanc, and actually this was one of the worst games for Febiven, actually. It felt like this one he didn't have much of a chance against Pawn's style for some reason. What do you think of the matchup there?
Pawn. Over the course of the tournament, I was probably most disappointed with Pawn's performance, especially in the series against SKT. As far as his series against Fnatic, the thing about Pawn's playstyle, I'm trying to think of like the way to describe it. He just does stupid things, like super aggressive, just ridiculous things. Like if he's trying to trade with someone, most people will like take an even trade and then they'll back off. Pawn's like, no, if we're gonna trade, I'm gonna like 100-0 you. And he'll always step forward. And that means he's always gonna get counter ganked. He's always gonna get flanked. He'll go and he'll run off into the enemy's jungle by himself and he'll just like try to set up like an individual pick. And so I think against someone as aggressive as Febiven, I don't know, it's almost like he can fake people out there's this joke that the Koreans expect you to play a very certain way, and if you don't play that way, you can actually like catch them off guard. I kind of think that this is most mid laners' experience when they face Pawn. They probably expect you to do something, and because Pawn does completely the fucking opposite, they're like, shit, what do I do now? But he'll always step forward. Just you're thinking like, okay, this guy's gonna step back, it's gonna be the end of the trade, he's gonna wait for nope, okay, he's stepping forward, he's just gonna auto attack him.
No, I think you've hit along a good chord there, because that's the thing. One of the reasons when I've watched all the games that Pawn played against Faker, one of the reasons why I think that Pawn's been able to solo kill Faker so many times, or just force him into uncomfortable situations, is because no one else would be stupid enough to play that way against Faker. Because if they did, they'd get ultra dumpstered and get totally snowballed the other way, right? They would literally one-handedly lose the game for their whole team, single-handedly. That was almost like a Froskurinn just putting together English as I went, like, how does this work? Does this one connect to that? Anyway, so here's my concept that along the lines of your philosophy you're outlining here, okay? Which is that Faker's biggest strength as a 1v1 mid laner, because he's obviously a very sick one himself, is that it's like he's the best at knowing the opportunity that exists, okay? So if he sees, if in like a split second he sees there's like a tiny window, and some of them, if it's the right champion, can be crazy. Like sometimes he'll just know that I could go all in now with like slightly less health, but I know that like my set combo of abilities like either will be faster than his, or like he'll have to do him perfectly to counter me, whatever it is, right? He's the best at seeing that moment and then instantly acting on it with like no hesitation. He just goes in and he kills you. So first of all, that makes a lot of mid laners frightened when they play against Faker, and they just try, like, people think it's like Bjergsen style, like it's a success just to try and get like 5 CS more than him and not ever attack him. Like that's considered a success to most people because they're so used to seeing people get shit on. But instead, Pawn is literally the guy where, like you're saying here, when there's a fight that shouldn't be possible for either to win, as in that there's no actual opportunity, like it's not like Pawn looks and sees, right, well, if I do every combo now, I'll definitely kill him. I think in some of these scenarios, Pawn doesn't know that he can kill him. He just decides, I'm going to like, essentially what I'm going to do is, it's like playing chicken, you know. I'm going to just go apeshit and let's see, like, do you just back off and I have a big advantage, I pushed you out of lane? Or do you go in the fight as well, except that you're not choosing this fight and you're thinking to yourself, like, well, how can I even win this fight? Can he even win this? It's just such a bizarre scenario. You can't be prepared for his initial attack, you know? And so he's the best at, like, forcing those, though. And, hey, listen, here's the thing. He doesn't get them off 100% of the time. Sometimes he fucks it up and actually dies himself. But it's just such an unusual playing style. It's so ballsy that when it does work, it's going to look incredible. It's going to look like you created something out of nothing. It's not like Faker where, like, wow, I saw, like, afterwards you could look at the VOD and go, oh, there was a little gap there where he could see, like, you know, this, like, I've got enough minions that'll attack, you know, whatever it is. Pawns is just like, I don't think any of that's going on in his brain. I think he's literally just like, he's like, it's more like he calculates, like, wait a minute, I can't calculate who's at advantage here, therefore if I just force it, I'm at advantage. It's almost some mad logic like that. What do you think?
No, I completely agree. I feel like he has honestly no idea what he's doing half the time. It's just like, Jesus, take the wheel. Just goes ham. I'm just imagining Pawn now in all of these instances being like, I think I'm just going to go for it. And his team, no!
Yeah, exactly. But you just have to hope that it works out. It's like that joke, okay, that they have in the NBA, that there's certain players who have like okay shooting percentage at 3-point, so they think they're 3-point shooters because every now and then when they get hot they might hit like 3 in a row, you know. So there's a joke that's because the coach usually goes by the numbers. He only wants his best 3-point shooters taking those shots, and he only wants them taking those shots where they're wide open, so it's going to be a higher percentage, you know. So the joke is when the 3-point shooter takes a shot and it's in a really bad spot and he shouldn't have taken it, he should have passed to someone else, the coach will be like, oh, it's a bad shot, and then suddenly it'll go in and he's like, yep, that's okay, yep. Okay, that's like what I imagine the people watching porn are like. They're like, will he? Oh my god, he's going to feed it. No, great game there. I love the way Carrie does. We really respect you as a teammate. Like the problem is, here's the crazy part. You'd think to yourself, if you looked at their team, that actually Pawn should be totally out of place in this team. Because with the style of play they have, they really should be playing the old EDG style of like utility mid laner, wait till the end of the game, then our player who is the best AD carry in the world will just win the game. We have an extremely high chance of winning if we get to that point, because our jungler's a team fighter, our top lane is a team fighter, our bottom lane is literally waiting till the late game anyway to get there. That's where their strength's going to be. Therefore, we should be trying to be as defensive as possible so we don't blow the fucking game in the 25 minutes when we could lose the game. Instead, here's the crazy part. Because Pawn is so different in mentality to everyone else in the team, as a result, he becomes like this weird luxury where he's not required to win the game, but he can actually win the game before they have to get to the team fight stage, just from these bizarre aggressive plays that aren't even going to be telegraphed in any way, you know. There's actually a similar scenario happens in Counter-Strike. I'll just give a little analogy for people who watch CSGO here, which is that the best team at the moment, at least in the rankings, is a team called Fnatic. And actually, most of the players in their team, the reason they're the best is they're the best at the default style. Like, they play defensively very well, and their team play is excellent, and their communication's impeccable. And the idea is, if they have to rotate an extra man into a site, it's always like ahead of the timing of when other people would do it, or it's like right on time to work together to battle back and get a bomb site back or something. But they have one player on their team called JW, and he's just like Pawn, right? Because he's not the best player in the world, but when he's on his game, he'll look like he is, because he's so aggressive, and he does things that are seemingly random. Like, he'll randomly peek someone, or he'll peek, and then the enemy will shoot and he'll miss. And normally that's when you like hide. The enemy is going to be looking at exactly that corner. He will do the opposite. He'll like re-peek even harder, so that then the enemy is like, what the fuck? Why would that guy come out? And then he'll kill him. So what happens is it's the same effect. He can fuck it up and put his team in a 4v5 situation, which is obviously a disadvantage. But because the rest of the team is so solid, it's almost like they can allow him to be like a wild card. And then when he goes crazy on top of their very, very solid style, they're going to win the game anyway. And what's crucial is they balance out his style. Because say he does fuck it up and die, because their team is so solid and works so well together and does like the right play, like the Monty style play all the time, it means that they also have a way better chance of overcoming a 4v5 deficit than a normal team does. So in a similar sense, if Pawn fucks up early on and even just gives up kills or even gets snowballed, which is going to be rare admittedly, EDG as a team is one of the only teams that could come back and could win in the late game anyway. So in a way, it's like you can counterbalance that risk in that sense. What do you think?
No, I think that's a good way to look at it. I know that Kelsey has equated Pawn as the Darien of EDG, and I didn't think that
is such a divisive statement. Like, until someone's read that piece, they're going to be like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, is that a compliment? Is that the biggest diss of all time? Like, what is going on here? Give us the gist of it.
What she's saying is that Pawn can run around and do whatever he wants, and he's like this device to cause attention. And so It's like Darien. He would run around and people would chase him, but while people are chasing him, they would take everything on the map underneath him. So it's the same idea with Pawn. He'll walk into the enemy jungle and he'll get like 4 people, and he'll maybe possibly kill 1, 2. It's happened before. And while he's doing this, EDG take like a dragon, or they take a baron, or they take a tower, or they set up and they find the perfect re-engage because they trap someone. And you see this all the time. Like, Pawn will be the first to go down, and then suddenly either EDG's collapsing on them, or they find like a straggler and they just immediately trade it up or find an extra advantage.
So here's the analogy for you, Froskurinn, about Pawn. So in a group of girls, high school level girls, or like girls who are like 18, 17, 18, there's a group of girls who are friends, okay? Pawn is like the one who's like the really loudmouth one. He's like flaunts his sexuality. He's like the really brash one. And so what happens is, because he's so brash and flirty and just out there, it means that either... First of all, he's like the attention whore. Everyone's just looking at him. Everyone's giving him all the attention. All the guys at the bar are just looking at him, you know? So either you get... There's a dual benefit to it. Either he draws in all the guys, okay? So then if there's a guy who's a really quality guy, he might get drawn in by that girl and get to know the group. But then if you're like the quiet, sort of like sensitive type who's actually like beautiful on the inside, and you actually do have some charm beyond just like flaunting like the makeup and the lips and all that, you're actually quite just appealing as a person anyway, then actually he'll draw them in, but then you might get to know them anyway, you know? You might actually... They might actually realize, okay, you know, like she had all the flash up front, but actually, like, I respect this person more. Much like in EDG, you see the Pawn outplays, you're like, wow, he's so sick, he must be a carry. But then once you watch the team, you're like, oh no, Deft's the solid, reliable player here. You know, I understand his true inner beauty and like what he brings to something, and the way that he's like expressing who he is as a person. He's not fake. He's not just doing things for the sake of doing things. There's a meaning behind them, you know. And I want to build a long-term relationship with Pawn, with Deft in that sense, but. There's an added benefit as well for us, which is like sometimes when Pawn draws in the attention, draws in the girls here. This is the guys rather in this analogy where the flashy girl. Okay, the other benefit to the other girls in the group is that if the guys who get drawn in are total assholes or they're really annoying, then they can sort of just like they get drawn in by that girl, but they can also like pre-select away from them in that sense, like, all right, we'll just leave them to talk to her, like we'll just, you know, we're not into that, like she's like sort of attracting away the scum basically, like the idiots you don't want to be, and then it's like a screening process here. That's the analogy for how Pawn works in EDG. Okay,
I just look at my feed and I'm like, Pawn's the carry of EDG, mute.
Yeah, well, he isn't, so we all know that. Right, so after the Fnatic game, we had a game that I don't think we need to talk a whole lot about, which is that Deft decided, right, well, if I'm going to play Jinx, I don't want to play it against the real team in case they actually, like, see what I'm doing and, like, get prepared for it. So I'll just warm up against bots with it and, like, try just farming. So he played Jinx against Bestikas Esport Club, and he wrecked the shit out of them, and that was pretty much the end of that game. So, yeah. They got 3 kills in the game, in case anyone's wondering.
That was a classic.
We're not talking about TSM here, guys. We're talking about Bestikas Esport. Just in case you missed that first part, Bestikas got 3 kills. Okay, just check it out. So it wasn't much to talk about in that game, right?
Right.
But then, oh boy, then we got to the game, 8th of May, 2015. Remember it, guys. D-Day for people who love League of Legends, who are good in, who have human spirit, who have love in their hearts. D-Day for League of Legends. So the nail in the coffin of TSM, the nail in the coffin, was their last game against EDG. They had to essentially beat EDG, I think, to have... I'm not even sure if they could have got at that point, but I think they maybe...
They had to beat EDG, and Fnatic had to lose to their final match, which was either the International Wildcard team... I think it was the International Wildcard team, because I believe AHQ had already beaten them. Yeah,
it was. So it was very unlikely anyway that they'd get out, but in theory...
They could have.
The coffin wasn't entirely hammered shut.
Yeah.
And I hadn't started my funeral speech until the moment that this game ended, so there was still hope. Maybe... EDG's overrated. Maybe TSM comes back and wins. Maybe. Dreams. Death. Now in this game, if you were a TSM fan and you were like, oh, I'm really disappointed with the way that TSM's picking these like champions that don't really fit Bjergsen's playing style, and I don't really understand what's going on here with like the style of play. How do you feel about this Urgot pick mid against Pawn's Azir?
Things that need to be noted beforehand. Pawn is a shitty Azir player. Like, let's just get that out of the... I know that they were talking about, like, his Sand Soldier bending and things like that. Pawn is not a good Azir player. He's never been a good Azir player. He could play the champion as far as, like, its buttons and shit, but that is not his favorite matchup. I think,
Why do you think they picked it? Because actually, in the bans, TSM gave no mid lane bans. So LeBlanc was open. Everything's open, basically.
Well, that was kind of like Bjergsen's thing the entire tournament, is he never went for the assassin matchup, whereas you have Febiven, who sees Faker, and he's just like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to play Zed, I'm going to play LeBlanc, we're going to go for it. And Cassiopeia was such a huge pick this tournament. Obviously, I think, no, he got banned against Fnatic. Yeah. So Cassiopeia was open, and he didn't go that direction, so... I mean, I don't know if Bjergsen decided to pick those champions. In fact, it was Loco Doco.
The only mid lane bans in this particular match were EDGs, and they banned Lulu and Zed. But that's it. So even Bjergsen could have picked LeBlanc. But why? I'm asking, why would Pawn pick Azir? Do you think? What was the logic there?
Pawn always. It's not an awful matchup. I think Pawn really likes the champion. Like when people ask Pawn about his champion pool, like. Because Fizz is considered really out of meta and not like a good champion. And obviously like Westor is playing it, and I feel like Pawn is looking at Westor like, why can't I play that champion? But when you ask him about it, like, do you think your picks are unconventional or things like that? Pawn's like, no, I play good champions. And they're like, well, Fizz hasn't been played in the meta for so long, especially AP Fizz. And Pawn's like, what's wrong with it? It's a good champion. Like, he has... As far as I can tell in interviews, he has like no idea about how weird his champion pool seems to the rest of us, or just like a casual bystander. I know that he likes to play Azir. I know that he really wants to play Fizz, and his team just doesn't let him.
So obviously that's going to feel like you slipped a little burn in there, which is now only activated when I say so. Pawn is a shitty Azir player in your words, and he went 8-3-9 on Azir, and Bjergsen went 0-6-1 on Urgot. So what was the actual mid lane matchup in this game like, do you think?
It's hard for me because I don't actually know comfortably the Urgot mid lane matchup to Azir. I don't
think anyone does, to be fair.
Well, I prefer Urgot in the mid lane because I think it then opens up for you to take like a hyper scaling AD, which makes more sense to me. Like if you're gonna have
but
a
that's
composition...
the thing. They took Corki.
Well, if you're going to have, and this is a problem with teams drafting, if you're going to have an Urgot, which is an anti-carry, I think it makes much more sense to put it in the mid lane position just because your late game damage is mostly going to come from your AD carry. Like between like a hyper carry, like Kassadin versus Jinx, the Jinx is going to do more damage. So it makes sense to me to have Urgot mid if you're going to pick it so early. The problem with Urgot is that he's super immobile, so on the mid lane, since it's the shortest lane, you've guaranteed a little bit more safety right there. He does need his tier and at least level 4 before he can start becoming like a massive menace. But then you think like Azir is also bringing that crazy range. Like the obnoxious thing about Urgot is that he can fucking just dumpster on you out of tower range while you sit behind your tower. It's just like absurdly ridiculous to play against. But Azir, he's going to snowball a lot earlier because he's going to have his combo available to him at level 3. Level 2, and he also has much more reach. So I think an issue with Urgot is that if he gets behind in the levels 1 through 4, so you need high jungle pressure to make sure that he can get to that tier point where he can start punishing his laners and being like that anti-carry. And the problem is he had Santorin. And Santorin throughout this tournament just notoriously didn't gank at all. So
okay, if we're going to talk about matchups in this tournament, yeah, obviously the Bjergsen Pawn one's the marquee matchup, but actually Santorin was playing Sejuani, and Clearlove had one of his maximum Kate Upton rack games on Rek'Sai where he was 10-1 and 10. Anything to comment on the jungle matchup here?
People think that for whatever reason Sejuani is the best jungler in the game. I entirely disagree. I think, and people will even then go to Gragas, I think Rek'Sai is by far the best jungler in the game. Anytime I see Clearlove get Rek'Sai, it always kills me when they prioritize Sejuani just because they are a team fighting team, and obviously Sejuani's gonna have that massive team fighting ultimate. Especially in the Rek'Sai versus Sejuani matchup, because Rek'Sai has so many tools to punish Sejuani. The thing about Sej is that she has a really weak initial first clear, so it's very slow. So again, if you have a mid laner that's really reliant on early ganks to make sure that they survive so they can find their power spike and they don't fall too far behind, why the fuck would you pick Sejuani? Because Sejuani's not going to be able to gank. She can have some gank potential at level 3, but she has to start, I think, red buff at that point because she has to smite it back for her health and then immediately run to the lane. But Rek'Sai is so fast in her clear that if you did that against a Rek'Sai, so if Santorin decided to start the red buff and then go and gank the mid lane, because Rek'Sai's so healthy and so quick that she could just run into your other side jungle or counter gank you, because she'd probably be done with both buffs by the time you finish your one. That's a joke. She just run in and take your shit. So like the jungle matchup was really inefficient to what?
The fact that you had to say that was a joke. Otherwise
Well,
people were like, incorrect information, you don't even know how long the buffs take. You never play this game, girl, get out. So okay, you were saying there, I agree as a concept, if you're going to pick Urgot, well, that's one of those scenarios where I get puzzled even by pro team, because I don't know that much about the game, but when I'm looking at the pick ban, I'm always doing kind of like what someone like Monty would be doing, because I've obviously listened to a lot of his analysis of the OGN games. As you're building the comp, I'm like, where's the damage going to come from? Like, who's going to carry the like, because I'm trying to figure out myself who the responsibility's on to carry the game, to do damage at this point in the game, etc. So when you pick Urgot and your top lane is Sion, why are we then picking Corki as our AD carry? Like, at that point, if we haven't shit on them hard by mid-game, isn't it like game over already?
Yeah.
And our jungler is Sejuani. Like, where's the damage on this team? What are we going to do? I mean, I assume that they were naively thinking Bjergsen's just going to shit on him in mid lane. He's going to abuse, just going to queue the shit out of him. Like, he's going to somehow get a big edge there. And then also, maybe they thought to themselves, that whole thing about EDG, like they only tend to win around 25 minutes. Like, okay, maybe we can get something going at 20 minutes, at 18 minutes, and we can do something with this Corki. Because again, Deft was on Kalista, which again isn't like a Deft champion. And remember, he could have picked anything here, but he chose the Kalista. So, interesting pick there.
And I'm glad that we're talking about like mid-game power spikes, because the thing that's actually really interesting and very unique about Kalista is that she's going to find her power spike at 2 items. So especially if you fall behind, like it's almost game, set, and match at that point if you fall behind with a mid-game power spike champion like Corki, like Lucian, just because at that point, typically in like a mid-game, if you're a Jinx, the Lucian's like, I'm fine, it's cool because we're a mid-game, and Jinx needs at least 2,300 more gold because she needs her 3rd item before she has her full core and she can start doing damage. And obviously I'm alluding to the Last Whisper, so it's usually like your BF item, which is typically an Infinity Edge, your Zeal item, which can either be a Fan Dancer or Static Shiv, and then your Last Whisper. But for Callista, she only needs 2 items, especially the way that Deft plays her. He still does the Rend build, so he'll prioritize attack speed and the Hurricane before he goes into the Bloodthirster. Like, typically Bloodthirster is a good answer to, like, Assassins just because you bring your shield. So if there's ever, like, a LeBlanc mid, you'll see a lot of Callistas go for the BT first. But the fact that Callista finds her big core and her power spike when she has fucking upgraded boots, her Hurricane, and her Bloodthirster, like, it's absolute disaster if that team doesn't snowball ahead and make sure that they have the Trinity Force by the mid-game.
Because this all leads into how I wanted to characterize this game in terms of how TSM's philosophy on it was, which is, if you actually look at the pick ban, they put a lot of emphasis onto the top lane, actually. They had Dyrus pick Sion, and then their bans was Gnar, Hecarim, Rumble, and then EDG themselves banned Maokai. So, in theory, Korra 1 has all these champions taken away from him, and he actually chooses to play Dr. Mundo in this game. Do you think they were trying to, like, protect Dyrus in this particular scenario? What do you think the logic here is in wasting 3 bans on the top laner?
I think they identified that Korra was the primary carry of EDG at the time, just because he had fantastic performances, especially on his Hecarim. Like, I was really surprised that he would ever get that champion again throughout the entire tournament, as well as his Gnar has insane stats. So, I mean, I don't necessarily think it was just about protecting Dyrus. I think they thought that that's where they had the most flexibility in their pool. And obviously, you don't want to, like, especially if you have Pawn versus Bjergsen. In a theoretical matchup, you're like, okay, both of these players have absurd champion pools. A Pawn a little bit weirder. But Bjergsen, you know, as far as the West narrative is concerned, should be able to stand up to someone like Pawn to play the Assassins. So, no surprise that they wouldn't try to target ban there. They just kind of leave it up to a counter pick. So,
since this is the point in the tournament, as I've alluded to, where TSM exit the stage and the top teams go on to play the semi-finals and see who's going to win the tournament, you know, and vie for who the best region is. So since TSM exits there, you know, what do you think of Bjergsen's overall MSI performance?
It's hard for me to say to point at Bjergsen and say, like, this was disappointing. I mean, obviously he wasn't on the champions that... I didn't feel like they were Bjergsen champions. I mean, I know he's played those champions, but when I think about Bjergsen, and again, I don't watch, like, religiously TSM stuff. I'm like, TSM's playing, gotta watch. But my idea of Bjergsen is he's this big assassin player. Like, his champion is Zed. That's why it was banned. And so I was just really curious why Febiven stepped up and decided to, like, go for the hard carry, but Bjergsen didn't. And I talked about how I think that Lustboy is the true carry of TSM as far as how he sets the pace for the team, but undeniably, Bjergsen is, like, the damage dealer of TSM. He has to get snowballing, he has to get rolling, especially as the shot caller. Like, a big thing with SKT is that whenever Marn fell behind, their shot calling would fall behind. And when we asked Marn about it, it's like, yeah, it's hard to shot call from the top lane in general, but B, when you do fall behind, especially because in a meta where the top liner is getting dove, just because it's so much harder, you have to focus on, like, catching yourself up as well as micromanage your own team. So for Bjergsen to not get snowballed ahead, to not be freed up to make those correct calls, and then likewise for Lustboy to not be freed up to lead Santorin and to help create pressure on the map, because I don't know, I always go back to this. Every time I looked at TSM's, like, lane swaps, and I only did probably a study on about 4 of them, but the most obvious trend to me was Lustboy is setting the pace of this game. Lustboy is the one who's setting up these ganks for Santorin, that's leading the charge into the jungle, that's actually doing most of the roaming. Like, Lustboy, even in a 2v2, there'd be scenarios where Lustboy would go and gank mid lane, or he'd rotate up into the top lane and invade with Santorin. And when Lustboy didn't leave the 2v2 lane, he just stayed with Turtle. And I think that there was a case where Turtle played Callista, so obviously that puts a limitation on Lustboy staying in the lane to give Callista extra bonus power on her passive. But the Bard game against EDG, there's no reason for him to stay in that lane. And obviously, yeah, it's Bard, so you can't take it super seriously because we haven't seen what this pick does and we haven't seen a trend for it in competitive play. But Lustboy staying in the 2v2, Lustboy not leading the charge, I think was the primary downfall of TSM. Even over Bjergsen's really questionable, very immobile champion pool. I think he played Ziggs, Cho, Urgot, maybe Lulu, I can't remember. But I don't know. Bjergsen's champion pool I would have rather seen him play an assassin and try to go for a hard carry, but I think Lustboy needed to roam. His team needed to free him up to roam.
I mean, the problem with all of that, okay, is to take all the blame off Bjergsen and not criticise his performance, you have to essentially assume he had no say in any of his champion picks, and that his coach 100% told him, you must play this, and therefore it's like his coach is a total cretin and just didn't understand his own players' champion pool. I actually very much doubt that could be true. Like from seeing that famous argument where him and Lokodoko are arguing, and they're sort of like saying, like arguing about whether he should get mid priority and get the champions he wants. Okay, I can understand that maybe there was something to do with that. Like maybe in general the approach that Lokodoko designed was like, we're going to play these sorts of champions and these sorts of comps, and we're going to build them like this. That could be the case, but it's not like Lokodoko doesn't understand his own players' strengths in any sense, and isn't aware that like his players going to do terribly on these champions. First of all, Bjergsen didn't do terribly. Like Bjergsen's played Urgot and Cho'Gath and had good games. In fact, he said great games on Cho'Gath at times in NA. So to me, it's more likely that Bjergsen himself thought he could play these champions, or thought they would work, or had an idea of how he would play them, and was incapable of doing that in the games. And then found himself against much better players than he's playing against normally, or maybe has ever played against in terms of Faker and Pawn. In general, he hasn't really played these level of plays. He obviously played Pawn, but that was in Samsung White, where it's a very different setup to this EDG team. So I actually think this was a very underwhelming performance by Bjergsen, because when I look at this overall series, I can't look at even one game, ignoring the Bastikas game. Of the 4 losses, I can't even look at one and go like, right, well, that was a good game. Or like, in that game, they lost and they had no chance to win, but he was a shining light, he could have won. Like, to me, the overall performance was one of the worst I've ever seen from someone touted as a star, you know. Yeah. I mean, let's be real here. Westdoor significantly outperformed Bjergsen, but there's nobody rushing to put Westdoor on like a top 20 players of all time type list, and yet that's where it's getting now, so that people want Bjergsen to be. That's where he's angled to be with everything else. So I think this tournament, it's not the end for Bjergsen. He can have another great tournament and win it all. Well, he won't win it all back, but he can overcome the issues he's had now and move on with his career. But this was a big one. This one counted, and he fucking blew this one. So, for whatever reasons. Okay, so moving into the playoffs then. So, in the playoffs, we had this semi-final of AHQ against EDG. Now, here's the thing. You mentioned before, like, they've scrimmed before. Just because of how the group stage went, this should have been expected to be competitive. Like, I forget what everyone said, but I guarantee...
Am I the only one who thought that game wasn't close at all?
No, I thought EDG would win, but I know that... I guarantee you, every single analyst, because of how well AHQ had done, would be like, oh, they'll win at least one game. You know, they have a chance. But actually, EDG just 3-0'd them. Yep. Was AHQ different in the playoffs from the one that was in the group?
No. And here's the thing, like, when I talk about the AHQ like group stage match against EDG, yes, I acknowledge they did make a huge mistake early game, but like I said, as soon as they found their power spike with Sejuani and it came to actual team fighting, like 5v5, EDG crushed them, just pretty much on like every single front. Like, it took a while, but as soon as they found their power spike, I was like, okay, game's over, and this is how we're gonna close it out. So like, coming into the AHQ versus EDG match, I was like, this is no contest. Like, I knew it was gonna be a contest with Fnatic. Like I said on the previous incoming aggression, the problem is that yes, you have incredibly high 5v5 teams, AHQ and Fnatic, but they don't know how to 5v5 as well as EDG do. So they're going to play into EDG's style, and EDG just does it better, and so they're just going to win.
So in this game, Pawn went for the Cassiopeia and went pretty ham. And then Westdoor, unfortunately, couldn't get a lot done on the Twisted Fate. What did you think?
They targeted Westdoor's champion pool a lot as well. I think Westdoor's best game, his performance was on his Fizz, where he had like that crazy dragon fight, but... Clearlove he played Nautilus jungle this game.
Yeah. See, that was underwhelming there for Froskurinn, you know, because I thought like playoffs. This is when, remember, the storyline for Clearlove is he has to dominate. So in this game, it's like he comes out and he's wearing a sports bra. He's got like a t-shirt on with no cut to the neck whatsoever, and I'm like, what? Why are you hiding your talents? Like, come on, what? Oh, that's not fair. He's like, I'm just running to the shop. Like, I didn't want to put my makeup on and feel sexy right now. I'm like, oh, whatever. Oh. I don't want to have a conversation with you. This is not what this is about. Okay, so anyway, yeah. So he played Nautilus, so that was a fairly humdrum game, right?
Yeah, I mean, he did his Nautilus thing. I don't think that Clearlove was the carry. It was more about Mako and Deft again on that Callista Thresh combo and Pawn, like getting his Cassiopeia. And Koro got Hecarim again, and I don't know why that kept happening. I think it was the first game, too. Wasn't AHQ versus EDG the first time that Koro got Hecarim, and he just absolutely dumpstered them?
That's the thing. In the first game, they picked a bunch of champions that they'd already had before.
Yeah. I don't know. That was...
So, okay. Game 2 arrives. Westor locks in the Fizz. They're going for broke now for Froskurinn. He had a good game on Fizz, right?
Yeah, he looks good on Fizz. Unfortunately, it just wasn't enough for his team, and they're running like a tried and true EDG comp with having the Sivir, not Severe, with the Sejuani and the Maokai. So
someone gave you a pointer on that one, did they?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So the other problem with Westor picking Fizz here is it doesn't help picking a champion like that, especially a really snowbally one, when you're playing guys who are like gods of that champion as well. And by the way, when people say Westor's a Fizz god, he's very, very good. But someone like Pawn is a Fizz. There has to be another level to it because he's another level of Fizz. Like this guy might be like the god of Fizz, And Pawn was on Kassadin, and listen, who the fuck even plays Kassadin right now? But when Pawn plays it, he bodies dudes. He's unreal on it.
I'm surprised more teams didn't play Kassadin, actually. I just feel like I imagine that they were in comms and that Pawn just saw Westor locking Fizz twice in a row, and he was like, my fucking team never lets me play Fizz. I told you Fizz was a good champion. And that when Westor beat them at that initial dragon fight early on in the series, I just imagine Pawn just looked over his team like, fucking Fizz, I could play this. I could be doing this right now.
Like, what's funny is, in theory, Kassadin's like a scaling champion, and you're supposed to like wait till you get the... Like, if Monty's your coach, you'll be like, wait till you get the rod, stack the rod. I don't want you to fight until the stack... Like, that's like how he would coach you. But you know that the way that Pawn plays Kassadin is like, well, of course, that's what they'd think I was going to do. But actually, I'm just going to abuse all my combo and go all in as fast as... Like, he'll go 1v1 and try and dive people's towers, doesn't he?
My favorite part was when, again, at this dragon fight that Westor really ruined, it was because Pawn took the lantern over the wall and left Deft there. Like, the lantern was meant for Deft because obviously Pawn has Rift Walk, but Pawn like failed his Rift Walk into a wall and then immediately grabbed Mako's lantern, and Deft just sat there like, I guess I'm gonna die now. But Pawn.
So, okay, again, I come on, I'm like, right, well, he's gone to the shops now, he's had his dinner, aren't we going for cocktails now? But then this time, Clearlove's just wearing like an Angora cardigan, and his kind of nose is a bit stuffy. I think I'm just going to watch movies and have some cocoa. I'm like, again, nothing, I don't get anything here, just Sejuani, like, are you feeling okay, love? Are you under the weather a bit? He's like, I promise I'll be better in the third game. In the third game, just let me have a little nap, and then later on I'll get dressed up to the nines and we'll go out for drinks, you and me. And I was like, oh great, I'll see you in game 3. So game 3 arrived, and if I'm being honest, I think he was ill earlier because this was a much better game. Now Clearlove went on to Gragas, which might even have been the first time he played it in this tournament, but he had a very solid Gragas game, and this game in general was an absolute body bag. This one wasn't good.
Clearlove is not a Gragas player. I think he's now played it, I want to say at most 4 times competitively, including this tournament. And the first time he showed it in LPL, it was atrocious. But more importantly, Koro got to play his Aurelia, and I don't think we've seen his Aurelia
Think about this as well. He played Aurelia into Nar. Now, you remember what the LCK finals was all about? It was about how that matchup doesn't work.
Was that Smeb who picked Aurelia?
Smeb kept picking Aurelia. Yep. Now, admittedly, Ziv is not Marin.
Yeah.
He is not Marin. Let's just make that clear. Ziv is not Marin.
That's not a high pedestal to hit. Sorry, Marn.
Well, we'll talk about that later, but okay. But yeah, Koro 1 went ham on Aurelia.
Yep.
Fulfilling the dreams of Wicked that the champion is, in fact, still a very strong meta pick. I wonder if I could even do that accent. I don't know if I can remember. It's like, yeah, Koro picked Aurelia, and it doesn't matter if it's in a meta. You could play it outright. It's good to be in rage mode, and when he's not, then no one builds Aurelia like I do. I go Triniforce first, then straight into the this time he went to Frozen Heart. Like, I don't actually recommend going that way. It's can be very too dangy, if anything. Like, I prefer the damage, like mobility boots. That's my build. But Koro, I guess he's like number 3 Aurelia after me and Shai. Like, okay, that wasn't bad. It wasn't good for scoring. It was okay. I was like 6 out of 10 wickets.
You were like, I think we got a little Dell tech service in there.
Okay.
Just on the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, was there anything else of note in this game?
Coral played Aurelia. No, that was pretty much it. Coral played Aurelia. Deft was on Urgot, so like whatever. Gragas, clearly was not the best Gragas player, but Coral played Aurelia. He was amazing. And I think Coral was definitively the best top laner at this tournament.
So here's the thing. Coming into the final, we now had this weird scenario where SK Telecom hadn't lost in the group, and because they'd used Easy Hoon against EDG, it made it look like, right, well, based on that, they are the strongest team, you know, they should have an advantage. But then because of the nature of their semi-final, where Faker played all the games and yet they almost lost. Like, people will forget, okay, Game 5 wasn't close. SK Telecom convincingly beat Fnatic, and they did it like every minute of the game almost, you know. Mm-hmm. But you have to remember, the real game that mattered in that series was, I think, Game 3 was the one where Fnatic had their chances, but SKT overcame. I think that was the Z game from Febvrin. So that was the game where maybe Fnatic could have won the series. So again, SKT legitimately were at threat of losing that semi-final. So when you come to the final now, people are always going to people do this all the time in tournaments for Froskurinn. They always just look at the last game and they imagine some sort of momentum exists, that there's a carryover, and if you played a lesser opponent closely in the last game, that means against a stronger opponent you won't be as good. Here's a principle I've got for you. It's one of the reasons why in CSGO analysis of desks, I have by far the highest rate of anyone on the desks at predictions. It's partly because I don't subscribe to that theory of there being this sort of like momentum that crosses from game to game. Like, there can be trends you can notice, like, oh, this player's like having problems with this champion, so if he picks it again, maybe I'll favour the other team or favour him not to do so strongly. But in terms of just sheer overall team level and form, I don't think it's as strict as that. Like, if you did badly before, then next game you're going to be just as bad. I actually think there's a reset between games in a series, and between series especially, there's a massive reset. And there's like a famous saying from sports, okay, that says, form is temporary, class is permanent. And the notion is, if you're an amazing team, then even if you have a close group stage or a close semi-final, if you're playing an opponent where you're matched up well in the final, you can almost throw the rest out the window and it will actually be a really good match, and you can potentially play to the max of your capabilities, regardless of whether earlier on you didn't, okay? So personally, I always reset like that, and that's why in finals, sometimes I've had some really good predictions where I predicted a team that had been kind of clinging on up until that point dominates, you know, because it's the right matchup, and they've kind of reset from what happened before. But coming into this final, did how close the Fnatic SKT semi-final become make you think like, oh, it's EDG's definitely going to win now then? If Fnatic could do that to him, EDG's definitely going to win this final.
No, I thought the fact that SKT would constantly fall behind like 10k gold, and then of course like the EU would throw back like, well, maybe it's just Fnatic for being so good for making them fall back by 10k gold. Understandably, Fnatic played. They overperformed. They looked awesome in this series. They should be very proud. I was really impressed with, I'm totally spacing the top laner's name. Huni? Yeah. I was actually really impressed with Reignover for a majority of that series. I thought that Huni and Reignover were like the primary carries. But Bevan went off. He got some solo kills on Faker. That was awesome. But the fact that I remember I was watching the game with my buddy Anthony, and I just looked over, and like Fnatic were so far ahead at this point, but there just kept being these really close team fights where there was a massive gold deficit, and I was like, Fnatic's gonna lose this. They just can't beat them. They can't team fight well enough. And that, I mean, people look at those games. There's literally like a 12k gold deficit at one point, and they go into a massive 5v5 and they lose. Like, or it comes out even. That should not be possible. There's these scenarios where they get like the perfect engagement, and Faker, eventually he does go down, but he makes like these crazy plays, or he'll take one person and then take like another person like to 25% health, or possibly kill two people at instances, and you're like, if that was any other player, he would have just immediately died. But because it's Faker, he almost killed two people with him.
Faker also did that shit where sometimes he didn't even have to get a kill. All he had to do was survive, but in doing so, you just burned every ability trying to get to him, get onto him, get three people on him, and kill him. And like everything was like kill Faker. That was the whole mission of the team fights for Fnatic.
I think the craziest one, and I forget which game it was, but it was Faker played Azir, and they had to be on purple side, because it was on top of the map. And there was this scene where on the top red buff, so right above Baron, where Fnatic like just got this amazing engage on SKT, and Faker used like this crazy sand soldier maneuver to pull himself back over like the Wraith Wall and into the mid lane, and he set down like the Azir turret. But it was just like, it was so beautiful because it's like, oh my god, he's just trying to escape, and then no shit, he's repositioning himself so he fights them with the tower, and then he had like 3 people dive on him underneath his Azir turret, and then he fucking killed one, and then he took like the other 2 really low before he went down. I was just like, that was possibly one of the most amazing plays I've ever seen, because not only did he evade and like not just instantly get blown up, but he repositioned himself perfectly, like to put himself in this prime example to do as much damage as possible before going down. So that was really concerning.
That's like another example of how unreal Faker is just as a player. Like, remember, it's not even like Azir is a famous Faker champion, but it's like after a certain number of games, they all just become really good champions. There's very few that he hasn't like not only got the handle of, but like mastered completely, where he just knows the limitations of the kit and what is possible. And the other thing about Faker is his decision making is like, it's too fast. It's the sort of shit where you can only understand what he did afterwards when you like break the game down. Like, you look slowly and you're like, well, what's he going to do here? But he has to do all that in real time, and versus unpredictable movements from the enemy. So yeah, he's unreal. So anyway, in this final Game 1, SK Telecom, there's no Faker. It's EasyHoon, and EasyHoon's on Cassiopeia, which has been a good champion for him recently, and he bodies Pawn Orianna. What did you think of this Game 1?
I think that EasyHoon was a perfect stylistic matchup against EDG, I think especially against Pawn, and I think EasyHoon beat him with the Cassiopeia, and then he beat him with the reverse matchup on the Orianna. EasyHoon completely bodied Pawn every single time that they faced. So I was really impressed with EasyHoon.
Clear love in Game 1, Sejuani.
I hate his Sejuani. I mean, Clear love had... The interesting thing about this best of 5 is I actually think that if you're looking for like the best analytical best of 5, I guess is the way to say, like the Monty approved best of 5, I actually think that the one versus Fnatic was better in terms of like rotation value and like understanding correct plays versus incorrect plays and things like that. The SKT versus EDG one, the final game was amazing, but for the majority of like the games, it was just so clear cut when a team was going to win. There wasn't a lot of back and forth and a lot of counter rotation play. So that was kind of the thing about this series for me. Like, other than Game 5, like I still thought that the Fnatic versus SKT series was better.
So in this Game 1 though, Deft goes on to Urgot. We have another Urgot game. This was a bit of an underwhelming game though.
Yeah. Koro played as Gnar, wasn't enough. I don't even know. I think draft phase was a primary problem, and they did change it up a lot after this, so it was clear what their intention was. Like, that's kind of the interesting thing about these games, is you can kind of see the different ways that EG are crafting their strategy. The fact that this game opened with a new Rek'Sai band, and in a lot of the interviews, Clear Love had been talking about how Bengi had a very suspect champion pool, and he showed a lot of limitations. But this is also like the game for Bengi where it's like, hey, I could also play Gragas, and I can play this really well. And the thing about Gragas, and it's also unfortunate that a lot of teams didn't play Janna, that Janna's kind of out of her way, out the door as far as the meta is concerned. Because you just think about like EDG as a team, or even just Fnatic as a team, like these really hard, aggressive, like dive you under your towers very early. Disengage works so well for them. Anytime I see a Gnar, anytime I see a very aggressive team, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a Gragas and I'm going to pick up a Janna, like the two hard disengage. I'm just going to reset the fights. And it works so well against Gnar because obviously you're trying to micromanage your rage bar, that as soon as he's Mega Gnar and he goes in, if you just blow him away, reset the fight, and then just kite backwards, it's beautiful. So I think that the fact that Bengi did pull out his Gragas and he was able to play it this time around was a huge factor for these games.
So in Game 2, this was the game where Pawn actually himself gets a lot of kills on Cassiopeia. Matchup. So why are you saying EasyHoon was good in this game? What impressed you about him?
EasyHoon's lane dominance is super... I'm trying to think about the best way to explain it. Like, if you just watch him in lane, his CS is going to be perfect. He's just going to sit there and, like, every single trade, he'll either trade evenly or he'll out-trade you. There's never, like, an instance where he...
Okay, Keep going.
Oh, I'm waiting for something. Where he loses
Expound
a trade.
upon this brilliance to me. Keep going.
Where he loses a trade. I think EasyHoon also works much better with Marn. When Faker was put in, and I didn't notice this at first until it was pointed out to me by Tony, but there were so many instances where Marn would pick team fights, because again, he's the shot caller, so I'm assuming that he's the one that's saying go, where Marn would pick team fights when Faker was like across the other side of the map. But with Izahun, this never seemed to happen. So I just think Izahun's lane dominance is so oppressive, and Faker's is oppressive, but in a very different way.
When you say lane dominance, you don't really mean like he's not 1v1 solo killing people all the time. It's more like he just controls the lane and he controls the CS. And
it's like a Froskurinn style.
Oh, really? We've arrived there finally. Yeah. So what you're saying is, through Izahun, you finally come to be able to appreciate the mastery of the Froskurinn. You know? Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, I understand. You had to go the Paul route. You had to like be on the road to Damascus and then get blinded and realize the truth of Jesus, you know, but you couldn't just immediately go right there. You had to have this revelation moment, you know. But you finally got here. Welcome. Now join the cult. So in this particular game though, the star is obviously Deft, because Deft goes on his Jinx, which is undefeated, and I mean, Bang's, in theory, Lucian's a good champion for Bang. This was just the Deft show?
Yeah. Deft and Koro. Koro made some sick engagements. Mako played wonderfully. His Annie is a big champion for him. But anytime Deft is the best Jinx player in the world.
So then we went into Game 3, and it's 1-1 at this point in time.
This is
1-1. This is going to be the key game.
This is a classic EDG comp. As soon as I saw this comp come out, they run this all the time. They ran this. What I love about this composition, because obviously Azir is like a newer champion, but again, even when you and Name were on the team, this was EDG's bread and butter composition. FCZF was a big Annie Thresh player. He was the hard engage for the team. Azir is going to work very similar to how Orianna or Ziggs would work in this composition. It's about creating controlling area. So the fact that EDG still finds success on this composition, it's kind of one of their like staples, tells me that it's something about Aaron. And in interviews, and again, Aaron is the coach of EDG, Aaron was talking about how they use very specific training methods for rotational play versus team fighting play. They pick to face certain teams, and they work on those two aspects very differently and very separately. So the fact that this is a reoccurring thing kind of tells me that this is just like an Aaron thing, like being able to perfect this composition, how well they do it, because it's not about, like, obviously I think Pawn goes legendary in this game on Azir, but it's not about the Azir itself. It's about controlling the area around the absolute zero for Jinx to kind of run wild. And it's really pretty to watch, and I just love this composition. As soon as I saw this locked in, I was like, damn, this game's going to be over. And it was. Just a complete blowout.
Because the thing is, not only did we have Deft again on Jinx, which is undefeated on, but this is where we had Clearlove picks Nunu, which it's the Nunu meta, but he hasn't been picking it. Despite the fact I saw some stat, he has some, his stats on Nunu is like 24-6 or something utterly insane like that. So, yeah, that was left open. They let him have that. What did you think of Izahun on Lulu, though?
Underwhelming. I think Faker is the better. It's weird too, because Faker is like his favorite champion, I guess, is Lulu. He plays it a lot in solo queue, or at least it was one of his most played champions last year in solo queue. And he's always typically, like, if you think about the Bang composition where they put Lucian, Nunu, Lulu, and it's just about making Bang go as fast as possible. Like, Faker is typically the person that they run with that. So I thought it was weird that Coma didn't choose to sub right then and there. Like, if I think that there was a moment where Faker should have been subbed in earlier, because I do think it was really important that, I know you'll probably disagree, that for me as an EDG fan and as a Chinese fan, I think it had to be a series where it was split. Because if Faker had played all 5 games and they had lost, if Izahun had played all 5 games and lost, it would have just completely been the opposite. Well, if they had played Faker, then they wouldn't have. If they had played Izahun because he was a better stylistic, whatever. The fact that it was both Izahun and Faker's LeBlanc. Like, you had the 3 trials of hell that EDG went through to succeed. I think that there's no room for argument, but I do think that Coma should have switched right here, especially if this was the composition that he was thinking about going forward with.
No, but that's the thing. I think the other way around. Like, we're going to get to this at the end, but now, unfortunately for EDG, they're robbed of some of the credit of winning this series because the best player ever, the best player in the world right now, didn't play in 3 of the 5 games, where 2 of the EDG wins came. So, yeah, they still won the game, they still won the series. You can't take any of that away from them, but it would have actually, I think, enhanced their victory if Faker had played more of these games. Like, for me, Game 2... I understand why they might keep Easyhoon in because he's just won Game 1 and he won it in dominant fashion. But Game 2 is actually like almost an insult to Faker to me. So you have Easyhoon play and then play Orianna. Like that is the champion that Faker has the most wins on in his career. He is like the best Orianna player ever. And can use it in every fashion, aggressively, defensively. Just it's going to be very difficult to beat Faker when he's on Orianna. So to me, that immediately is like an insult there. And then after he then loses that game, it's like, how can he not be in for Game 3? If you at least put him in for the last 3 games, I can forgive it to a degree. But to me, this is one of the biggest coaching fuck-ups of all time. You had the best player ever, and you didn't put him in for more than 2 games in the series.
I think
and remember,
they should have swapped Faker right here, but I think starting with Easyhoon was the right decision.
How convenient. Anyway, moving on. Moving on.
But
so,
I think it was a stylistic matchup, though. Like, I think stylistically, the fact that Easyhoon's so safe in lane that he seems to be working, because majority of this team is SKTS versus K.
Okay.
And I think that Easyhoon works much better with Marn. I think their overall playstyle, it's a very slow-paced game. Even when they won those crazy Fnatic games and AHQ games where they were like 10k gold down, it was because they won it in the late game of just being super controlled, very passive. It wasn't like these really big, aggressive, flashy plays. And to my understanding, that was more so to S's play style.
Yeah, but that's why I think it's bad. Because here's the thing. The reason why SKTS, remember, was 1 game from making an OGN final. They made it to the semi-finals. They first of all, they had a full 5-game series against Najin Sword. Then against KT Arrows, they had a full 5-game series again, and they lost it, and KT Arrows went on to the final, and KT Arrows won. Now, even when they were 1 game from the final, me and Monty always stressed, this is by far the worst team that has ever made the semis of an OGN, and has ever come that close to a final. It's by far the worst, and the reason why is because SKTS had to go to that insane late game style to have a chance to win. And even then, they wouldn't win them all, by the way. It's more like they were the team that, like, dragged it out as much as possible, like, negated everything. They were like the anti-play team, and then tried to just win in this super late game fashion, like narrowly, even in that fight. So it felt like every loss they could get dumpstered, and every win took every single ounce of effort, and everything had to go perfectly, and it's like it felt like they were winning by the minimum possible. So my problem here, stylistically, is that to me, you're playing a losing approach when you play that style against EDG, because that's what EDG want to do anyway. If you say to EDG, let's just all play passive and farm up and go to a late game team fight, I think EDG's better than SKTS is at that scenario in this world where that's the team we had. Obviously we had Bengi, but aside from that, it's SKTS basically. I think that's playing into their hands. To me, the better approach stylistically would be to have Faker in and be more aggressive early on and try and force EDG out of their comfort zone, try and make plays. Like who wants to have Bang go late game against Deft late game, especially if Deft's on champions he likes? This is a bad matchup to me. I mean, I don't know what Monty thinks. I haven't done so many insight yet, but we'll find out if he disagrees. He probably will. But I mean, Coma made a good choice. I don't even care, but whatever.
No, I think Coma should have swapped right here. I think he should have had the majority of the games on Faker. But again, like I said, as an EDG fan, I'm happy that it was like all 3 combinations. But I definitely think that Faker should have been subbed in right here as soon as Easyhoon lost.
But here's the thing. So game 4, we bring in this scrub Faker guy who apparently has to sit on the bench for most of the finals of a massive tournament. And we let Koro have Maokai, sick champion for him. We let Klilov have signature champion Nunu. We let Pawn have the Azir that he's just wrecked everyone on. We let Deft have Corki, which is like a great champion for Deft. He knows how to play this well. And what happens? Faker pops on the old Kassadin and bodies fools. What do you think of this game?
The thing about this game, if you think about the approach and the mentality going into it, EDG, they just need 1 more game, and they do have a leeway where because they're 2 games up, they can technically afford to lose one. It's not what you want, and I'm sure it wasn't like, oh, we can afford to lose this. But if you look across every single one of their champions, these are all their favorite champions. Like, these are champions that they really like to play. Deft loves to play Corki. Pawn really likes to play Azir. Mako and Annie. Koro said that his favorite champion is Maokai. So not that this isn't like a terrible composition, although I do have my problems with it. The fact that we're about to close this out. That Faker just came in. We don't really know what to expect. And so, like, compositionally, it's, okay, just play your comfort champions. Just play what you want to play. Play your favorite champions. It still technically works. It's not, like, super random. But I do think that because they had leeway, because they were 2 games up, really led to Faker just completely smashing him. Like, Faker played amazing on his Kassadin, and of course it's like a perfect counterpick to his ear because he could just walk over the wall. But the fact that across, I look at EDG and they're playing every single one of their favorite champions, I'm sure was an aspect of it.
That's another problem with this whole Faker thing. What the problem is, Faker is so good that he makes these decisions not look like huge coaching blunders. Normal players, we're talking even normal great players, okay, top 20 players of all time, need a full series because they can't just on demand have godlike games every time they play. They need to sometimes have one bad game that then makes them decide, right, I won't pick that champion next time, or like I misplayed it early at this point in the game, you know. That normal humans, even gods, need that aspect to be able to play. The fact that Faker's so fucking unreal, he can sit on the bench for 3 games, then come in and just destroy in a 5th game or in the 4th game, whatever. Just if anything, gets his coach out of jail. Because remember, what if Faker comes in this game, okay, and what if he loses and he isn't like fully warmed up, or it's just the wrong champ, whatever it is, he hasn't got a feel for the game. What if they lose here and they've just lost 3-1? And they've just lost outright and he's only played 1 game. His coach looks like a fucking moron then, doesn't he? Because people are like, you played Faker 1 game and they never had like, if anything, Faker saves his coach's ass in this game by getting him to even a fifth game so that they can have a chance to win the series. So I actually think that the fact that Faker's so good is what makes those decisions seem like, oh yeah, that's a valid strategical decision. It's not a valid strategical decision to put the best player in the world in on your elimination game and just pray that you get to the next game. That's actually not a very good approach in my opinion, you know. But hey, people can get salty if they want. So let's go through to the 5th game then. So the story of this game, the obvious narrative, is Faker's never lost on LeBlanc. He was like 12-0, I think, at the time. And more importantly, if you look at the picks that EDG makes, to a degree, they sort of... I won't say this. They didn't bait him into it because he could have picked something else. It's more like they picked assuming that he would pick it. Like, if he does pick it, these are going to be answers. And so you're almost daring him to pick it to a degree, to a minor degree. What did you think of this composition they picked?
So what I know about this composition is that they had set up for this and practiced for it. They were expecting both Faker and both Bengi to play Nunu and LeBlanc, was the expectation going in. And Sancho even said that when he saw Faker hover Lulu, he was like, no, pick LeBlanc.
Who the fuck is Sancho?
He's the manager of EDG.
Okay. You can't just say Mexican names and expect me to know who that is. Okay, keep going.
So, and when you watch rotation, the very first lock-in for EDG is they pick their support and they pick their top laner, because obviously the two, really what really makes this composition is the Morgana, and then the Avalanche is kind of like icing on the cake. But obviously the primary things that they're hiding or they don't want to show is the Morgana, because in a standard draft phase, you would actually pick Morgana earlier because she can be used as a flex pick.
Yep.
So.
But you don't want to scare away the LeBlanc.
Exactly. So, to me, this is like the perfect, like all of the salt that the SKT fans and they've got 2 Koreans and a Chinese coach set up a trap for a Korean coach, and he walked right into it. And I have to go on this rant. It had to be Clear Love. Like, and people don't even understand. They say, oh, the Evelyn pick, that's really weird, and they know at some point that Clear Love's signature champion is Evelyn, but they just don't understand how. And this is why you have to read Kelsey's article. This is just a shout out. Kelsey did her best article. She does it exactly on this point. And when I read it, and this is gonna sound super lame, I actually started to cry because like the realization of, yeah, it had to be Clear Love. It couldn't have.
Holy
Dandy.
moly.
Oh my God.
Listen, I've seen some fantastic
Thorin.
tits as well, Froskurinn, but I've never started crying over them. I do other things over them. Just appreciate, ponder, just appreciate, yeah.
Dandy
Continue.
Cacao, because people will say Dandy Cacao, they could have done that. Like, why did this have to be Clear Love? The history of Clear Love, he always plays Eve in really big, important games. Like, it's his comfort champion. It's like his Orion. It's the thing that he goes back to when he knows that it's not even that. I think it's almost closer to Faker's LeBlanc. Like, I have to make a play. I have to be the big carry of my team. And historically, Clear Love has had to convince his team to let him play it. Against their Starhorn Royal Club game, they were all saying like play Elise, play Elise, play Elise. He's like, no, I really feel that Evelyn's like the better choice to go for here. And like the fact that his team would trust him to make that call, and the fact that his history with Aaron, like the fact that Aaron and Clearlove have never not been on a team together, understanding how this guy thinks about Evelyn and how he plays with the champion. And so to come to this moment in your 5th game, probably the most important international title.
That's like a Froskurinn way to speak, by the way. They've never not been on a team together. In other words, they've just always been on a team together.
They've always been on
a
team together.
Like, I imagine in the key points in your life, like you're looking out at a sunset, like the perfect cool breeze blows by, you're like, I'll never not love you. Like, wait a minute, does that mean that you're saying is that you'll always love, okay, yeah, kiss now. Okay, anyway, continue on about Aaron and Clearlove.
It was just, no one else could have done. No one else could have convinced Aaron that this was the correct pick to make here. No one else could have convinced his team. Like,
so why was it the correct pick to make?
Because it's a perfect counter to Nunu. You have to think that Nunu's big. When Bengi pulled out Nunu against Reignover in Fnatic's Game 5 and absolutely smashed him because he took everything, like Nunu, it's about counter jungling. The thing about Eve is because she's invisible, it makes it super dangerous to counter jungle because your primary ward spots aren't going to give you the information necessary to make a safe invade. Typically against Evelyn, what you do is you ward her camps because she has to come out of stealth to do her camps. But still, like if you think about like the really famous ward spots of like walking in behind mid-tier tower and like placing it behind that bush and you can see them walk, like those wards mean nothing. So it's much more cost what's what I'm looking for?
Cost efficient?
It's much more the opposite of cost efficient. Like you have to pay
inefficient.
There you go. You have to pay like a lot more to control an Eve. And so it slows down Nunu's playstyle and his natural tendency to counter jungle. So it made it much harder for Bengi to kind of do his thing. And then the joke, of course, is always like when I started casting the LPL, to me, Evelyn was Clearlove's pick because he wasn't a ganking jungle. He was a very herbivore style at this time. And Eve gave Clearlove like this added bonus pressure. So he could go and he could be a herbivore and he could just like farm his jungle, but because she's invisible, you just didn't know if she was right behind you or not. So it forced other teams to play safe without Clearlove actually having to apply pressure through ganks and other traditional means. So it just made sense to me that Clearlove was going to find his signature champion on Eve. But just to see the evolution of it, especially because in this style, he went full carnivore and was like diving towers and shit with Eve. So I don't know. It had to be Clearlove. Like the fact that it was the Evelyn pick in the 5th game against Fakers LeBlanc. You talk about how you could not write a better narrative. Like that shit was movie worthy. I just imagine like the 80s training montage of like Clearlove failing throughout his career and he works so hard. This is the other thing. We got to talk to Messiah while we were there, and you talk to any of these Chinese pros, and the one thing that they say about Clearlove is how hard he works. And the fact of the matter is against Bengi, the first game, Nunu and Rek'Sai were banned because Bengi's champion pool looked really suspect. And of course, he did manage to pull out the Gragas and he made a turnaround. Okay, I can play 3 champions now. There has never been an instance where Clearlove's champion pool is suspect, where he is limiting his team because he can only find success on 2 champions. He plays both styles. In China, he's known as Lightness Clearlove and Darkness Clearlove, because he can play that carnivore versus herbivore style. He has a massive champion pool, and like, I don't know. I love Clearlove. I love his tits.
Froskurinn, you just said there that there's never been a time like he had the problems with the champion pool. I think. Are you just going to completely erase those fucking Jarvan games from Worlds? They didn't exist, didn't they, Froskurinn? They didn't happen, didn't they? He's a master of Jarvan as well, is he? Okay, yeah, sure.
What I mean is like his team is never limited by his personal champion pool. Did he have the best Jarvan performance? No, absolutely not. Is Jarvan a champion that he can play? Yes, it is. So that's like, I don't know. Like Bengi only performed as 2 champions
against LPL junglers. Asterix. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, moving on. So obviously, like we mentioned, the fact that Faker's unbeaten on LeBlanc, but they pick this Morgana. Now, I want you to kind of expound on this, but the basic storyline, to my understanding here, actually this plays into something that we saw in the Fnatic series. Do you remember the game where Faker played Ahri? And Faker is a great Ahri because he's a playmaker, he's aggressive, he can use the Spirit Rush, obviously, if he has the chance to just get kills and to be very dangerous in team fights. And obviously, he is insane with those skill shots. But the reason his Ahri game against Fnatic was quite ineffective was because Fnatic was able to constantly force him to use the Spirit Rush to get out of situations. And so he was always lacking that offensive tool because he'd had to use it, and he had to just sometimes had to. There was one time when he had to literally just leave a fight, and they couldn't team fight then. Now, in this particular scenario, it feels like that's part of what this comp did to Faker, because usually what makes Faker so dangerous is that if you combo all of the distortion and everything together on LeBlanc, you can, there's like the danger zone of where kills are possible are almost insane. Like, they literally are possible under tower, etc. And so the threat is always there in fights that like Faker can just go in on one of us and kill us completely. So it felt like the Morgana, I mean, in the most basic sense, just pressing R is immediately telling Faker, you have to get the fuck out of this little zone right now. Like, you can't be within... So you're having to, again, defensively use these possible gap-closing offensive tools, but to kind of... You negate the use of them, essentially. Like, was that something to do with the way the comp worked?
Yeah, and likewise, if you kind of look across every single champion, there was just no practical target for Faker. Like, if he caught someone unawares, he could kill them. But you think even Deft, the AD carry, the super squishy one, he's got the spell shield, so he's at least going to eat a majority of the damage, especially if he does it correct on like maybe like a distortion that would proc a Q that would get insane damage. Like, Deft can completely negate that. And then on top of that, you have Pawn's black shield, like Morgana. You can't kill her if you're LeBlanc. You can't chain her down. You're going to lose most of your damage. Alistar is going to be able to press his R and walk into a team fight anyway. Maokai, he's got a fucking AoE exhaust with his ultimate every time he presses R. So his only clear-cut target is actually Evelynn.
So that's the thing. Going beyond Faker. And listen, Faker still did what he could. He made plays. It's not like he got shit on or anything. He did everything he could do to win this game. But, first of all, it was almost like 1v9 time for Faker. Like, he had to just beat everyone to potentially win this game. So that wasn't going to happen because the comp was really good and he's playing a very good team as well, crucially. But when you look at the rest of his teammates, this is another game where it's like, really? We're going to go with Urgot as the AD carry here? Like, what are we hoping for as the best case scenario on this, you know?
Like I said with the draft phase, the fact that they were forced into an Urgot first pick and they decided to put it in the ADC position because they wanted to give Faker LeBlanc, they couldn't pick Lulu. Like, and this is like the whole thing. Like, they couldn't pick Lulu because they had already picked Urgot. So it was almost like this perfect storm where Coma, I don't know. Coma just like put himself in a hole with this. He had to pick LeBlanc. It had to be LeBlanc or it had to be Cassidy. And I think he went to LeBlanc just because Faker's LeBlanc is his signature champion. But
do you feel like in this game, like it should have been on Marin then? Marin should have done more damage, or he needed to make more plays to give him a chance?
Marin is the most underwhelming top laner at this tournament, in my personal opinion. Like, I was expecting so much more from this guy, and to be honest, I was not impressed with pretty much anything he did. I think he had maybe like 3 solid games, but I want a stat on how many times Marin gives first blood, or how many times he just solo dies in lane, or how many times... I don't know. I was super unimpressed with this guy. I think. See,
here's the thing. That's actually yeah.
I think he's easily the weakest member on that team.
I think that's going a bit far. I think Wolf's worse than him. But
Hello?
I think, come on, Bengi, get the fuck out. Bengi's only half decent now because of the meta, and B, the fact that there's no other good jungler to kick his head in. So you're being ridiculous there. Marin's like the third best player on that team. Anyway, but that's a point of difference I have with Monty, which is that Monty thinks Marin's fantastic and he always reps him. In fact, I think he's even said he's the best top player in the world. What's funny is, even after that LCK final, I still think Smeb is better than Marin, and I think Koro's better than Marin. So to me, the two best is Smeb and Koro. I think they're the two best top laners in the world. Then, okay, Marin and some other people are next group, but I don't think he's some exceptional player. Plus, I've noticed it's only very specific champions he's very good on. Like, he is a very good Maokai player, for example. That champion he can do great stuff on. He's pretty good on, but actually, I don't think he's that sick, to be honest, especially because his original history was he was supposed to be the carry top laner, and everyone would just blame it when he couldn't carry on, like, oh, Easyhoon's not an aggressive enough mid lane, he doesn't have a good enough jungle, all these sorts of things. So I do think he's a bit overhyped. And I think his problem here is he was just playing one of the few people who is better than him right now.
I mean, I don't know. It's just
because at the moment, Koro's the best hybrid to me can do some carry, some supportive play, and as a result can choose which way he goes in the comp. Whereas a lot of these other players, they have to be one or the other to be at their most effective.
I personally still believe that LGD has the best top laners.
Oh no, actually that's another thing. I would probably put Acorn up in that mixture with Koro 1 and Smeb. I think it's like Acorn, Koro 1, Smeb. They're the top 3, and then Marin's just outside that group looking in. he's not quite in there. Because the other thing is Acorn's also like Koro in this sense. He can do both styles now because he's actually developed much more the carry style. So, okay, I kind of alluded to this before, but to me, you might not like this, but even though EDG won, I can't just be like, wow, what a victory for the Chinese region. They are the best. EDG is easily the best team in the world. Because part of me is like, well, let's see them against Faker 5 games. But we're never going to get to see that unless it's Worlds, maybe. So, the fact it's so close and no Faker first 2 games, I'm sorry, I don't take the win away. EDG won. You can't argue against that. And I'm not like, oh, if, but, and. But you don't get the maximum credit I would have given them if Faker had played all 5 games. Like, that's the thing. If Fnatic had beaten SKT, but with Faker in 5 games like he did play, that means a hell of a lot to me. Like, it's amazing to me that Featherman did so well against Faker in 5 games, you know. So what do you think of this aspect? I mean, presumably you do think EDG is the best in the world right now, right?
Yeah, I do think they are the best team in the world right now. I thought that...
By how big a margin?
Very slim. But the thing is people are like,
You do realise, by the way, that SKT completely fucked you on that Lord bet. You might have been a Lord right now.
I'm a
you
Lord
could have
in
been
my
a
heart,
Lord.
and everyone knows.
Okay, you're Lord in your heart. Okay, much like Clearlove, but it's titles only matter in real life, you see, because they have to be acknowledged. That's the point of titles.
I think EDG would have smacked GE Tigers even harder than they did SKT.
Sadly, we'll never get to know, will we? Instead, this became Thorin's playground where he was free rolling. He couldn't lose a Lord bet to Froskurinn. Then TSM shit the bed, got the heads totally rocked in. Bjergsen had one of the worst tournaments of his entire career. You know, the whole thing was like, celebrate good times, come on. Yeah,
it's okay. I got to, because I was sitting across from Monty. I had like perfect vision of Monty and Susie and Doa when they were sitting on the floor. They had their SKT flag. I was sitting like up high, and I got
okay. Your vision game was solid, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I got the perfect view of as SKT were losing that final game. Monty,
were you just watching his face?
he dropped his shoulders and he walked back over to Susie to sit down, and he just set the SKT flag down. He just leaned it against the wall and just. It was good. I laughed.
Did he just look like a broken man?
Yeah. I think he was disappointed.
Did he look like, as he watched the game, okay, I'm imagining the view, okay, you're looking over at him, and you know when people are on that angle, when they're in the crowd, you can just sort of see, because a human face isn't a mirror, but you can see light touching it, so you can see sort of like a half reflection of like flashing lights against it that are coming from the screen, and as he's doing that, as his eyes look out, and they've sort of glazed over a bit, did you sort of imagine that the scene just went like black and white, and it was like, hello darkness, my old friend? Is that what it was like, the GIF? If we could create that now for Froskurinn, would that be what Monty was like?
Pretty accurate.
It would just be called like Monty's Despair.gif.
He just set the flag down, and I was just like, yep, flag's
down. Not today, SK Telecom. Okay, real talk though. Here's the question I want to get into now. It's like sort of a final topic. How do we actually address this issue? Because in the past, the last time China had the best team in the world was literally World Elite coming into early 2013.
You know who else was on that team?
Who?
I think it was a jungler. I think his name was Clearlove.
So what's the relevance of that?
I'm just Clearlove, the Korean Slayer.
No. So anyway, moving on. He's not even the best player. He's not even the best jungler in the world right now, love. Anyway, aside from that, so he's not even the best jungler in LPL, love. So get with the program, or get your program cancelled. Anyway, so here's the point I was going to make was, so after that point in time, it's always been a Korean team, mainly because Korea's always been able to produce minimum one extremely good team. So we had SK Telecom, then we go on, we got Samsung White, Samsung Blue. We've always had some beast Korean team. No, it's true. This season we didn't actually have that because, interestingly, the only team that could have fulfilled that would have been GE Tigers because they were so dominant in the regular portion of LCK. If they could have won LCK, then they would have at least been on track to be like, oh, it's the dominant Korean team and now they're going to come win. Whereas instead, SKT had just an extremely exceptional playoff run, and then they came into this tournament and were very good, but had moments when they looked mortal, had moments when they had problems. So China technically has the best team in the world right now. They're the best. EDG's number one, and as a result, the Chinese region, clearly there's been some shift there. There's been some gaining in ground. Now, on one hand, people are just going to say, yeah, but they've also got some star Koreans in their team. How much is it that the LPL region has advanced in some sense, and how much is it having Koreans? How would you weigh it up for me? Give me the balance.
I definitely think that there is an argument to be made that the Korean influence has infected the Chinese scene. I do think still, though, that the Chinese are playing a very definitive meta that has always been in the region, but it's evolved. Their vision game has changed drastically. Their draft phase has changed drastically. And I think that those are probably the two most influential Korean influences. In all of the interviews across multiple teams, all of the Chinese and the Koreans are saying, you know, the reason why we imported this talent is not just because it's superstar talent, but because we wanted the Korean mentality injected into our teams to help our Chinese players perform.
So, okay, in the past, that's another thing. If you track it through, there's these dominant Korean teams, but there's always a Chinese team that has a chance. So we all remember OMG took the game off SK Telecom at Season 3 Worlds. Then Starhorn Royal Club played in the final, but obviously was demolished there because their only real strength was the team fighting. Then you go to the next one. You have the All-Stars where, okay, Shi-Young can play this champion, and OMG have some strong champions, but if you get them off them, then the Korean team convincingly defeats them. I mean, that's not the best Korean team, SK Telecom. Then you keep going, and you've got the Season 4 Worlds, where obviously Samsung White was incredible, and the Korean teams, the Chinese teams rather, okay, they could beat Najin White Shield, who were by far the worst performing of the Koreans, and they looked great there. But beyond that, again, it was a convincing win for Korea in terms of the elite team, the absolute best team. So that's one of the things you could always look at all these teams and say, right, they're always lacking in some aspect of vision or even just understanding the game beyond the fighting aspect. The fighting is where they excelled always. Their team fighting was always as good, or in some cases like Najin White Shield, maybe better than some of the Korean teams, but they always lacked in that area. So do you think even the Chinese players playing those roles have improved in that aspect?
Yeah. I think Koro and Mako looked great this tournament. I think that they... And what I found out is Mako is entirely in control of all of EDG's vision. So Clearlove is the shot caller, Koro is the captain, but any sort of vision, any sort of rotation macro call, like Koro does, Mako does a huge part of that as far as denying a vision and placing vision and understanding where the vision is. That's like entirely him. And I guess he's like super vocal in the comms, and that's part of a big reason why he got the job, because filling FCZF's shoes were fairly massive.
So, going beyond this, bearing in mind some of the things I just said there, like GE looked like the dominant Korean team until IEM and until the LCK finals. Obviously, EDG were utterly dominant in the regular part of the split, but then they had all these close series themselves where they gave up at least a game in every single series going through the playoffs. So, obviously, a lot can change even in a month. So, when I ask you this prediction now, obviously, you can't be held to this, like, you have to stick with it or whatever, but would you assume that come Worlds, China should have the best team at Worlds? Like, is this the year where China wins Worlds?
There are two things that I'm going to say. The first thing that I'm going to say is I'm going to acknowledge that China has never produced a team as good as a Korean elite team. So in my personal opinion, I thought that Samsung White was the best team to play League of Legends at like the highest possible level. And that China has yet to produce a team to that caliber. At the same time, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think SKT, as soon as the patch shifted, they went like undefeated, or they had some... as soon as Cinderhulk was switched over, introduced, suddenly SKT's record like shifted because obviously it played into their weakness and shored up Bengi.
Okay.
And I think that there is something to be said, the fact that when I saw GE Tigers at World Elite, if you go back and watch that Summoning Insight, I believe I say I don't think that GE Tigers are going to last because it looks like they have champion pool problems. And as soon as a patch, I think I asked Monty, as soon as a patch shifts over, do you think it's going to completely fuck them? So, like, my expectation going in was I didn't think GE was going to last just because I didn't think that they could survive the meta. And the fact that EDG has been so dominant over the course of all these different metas does speak to the strength of their team. Do I think that they've ever been as close as, like, a Korean elite team back in, like, the Golden Age? No. But I do think that because they seem so meta-resistant, that this is the best chance that China does have to win Worlds, although it's impossible to say. This definitely gave Korea a kick in the ass. I think that this was probably one of the best things that could have happened for the Korean scene, and I think that there's a lot more... I don't think they'll make the same mistake again, I guess.
Just to fuck with you, shall I mention two little pieces of trivia for you? So, 3 pieces of trivia. So, first of all, SKT went 3-3 with EDG in this tournament, and Easy Hoon went 2-2 with EDG, and Faker went 1-1 with EDG. So Just interesting little piece of trivia for that. Yeah, just numbers. How do you like that?
I still think Easy Hone is the better stylistic matchup against EDG.
Fuck off. No. Anyway, here's the analogy for you in terms of the Cinderhulk meta and how this tank meta maybe did prop up some of the other teams, okay? Kind of shored up some of the weaknesses of some of those players. Because the problem isn't, by the way, they had to already be good tank players to make use of the Cinderhulk aspect. Because everyone can do it, but if you want to be good, you have to. But here's the key thing: it took away people like Cacao being able to take these warrior types and just bully and beat the fuck out of them and make it more dangerous for them to play that style. So here's the thing: it's more like it's not that Clearlove couldn't impress, because he did. Everyone saw the Twitter feed of mine. He was very impressive. It wasn't just. Listen, here's the thing about Clearlove. It wasn't just his assets, like the quality he's brought to the table, but it's also that perfect ratio of the assets to kind of like the spacing. Like Doublelift with his like auto spacing. It's all about like the tit spacing. That's a key quality here, a proportion to how impressive the overall performance looks. But here's the thing: it's not that as a result he couldn't be as good. It's that he was forced to impress with his main qualities, okay? Because he couldn't play those warrior style champs. So what it's like is he was entering a contest and he thought he was just going into the club, okay? And he's going to be seeing any. So listen, maybe he gets dressed up and all. He has like the high heels on. That's I don't know how much you know about the female anatomy, Froskurinn, but the high heels are to show off the buttocks. They had to raise them a little bit and to show a certain posture that presents, in a sense, to the man. And he had like the little skinny black dress on, that really tight figure hugging, But then here's the thing: he came in, and even though he had that dress on, he thought, I've got my natural assets. They'll take care of themselves. But the rest, I've got everything done. I've got the makeup on, the lipstick, the red lipstick representing. Well, I mean, I think we all know enough about human psychology to know what that represents. It has the hair all done. He had it all, the hairspray, everything, all the accessories. He had a little nice bag that was cute with all the stuff in. He had everything in place because he thought, I'm just going to the club and I'm going to show off everything. I'm going to flaunt all my sexual qualities, all my person. I'm going to express who I am as a person to these guys, okay? But when he got there, he noticed that all of his competition, all the other girls, they were like girls that like, they didn't have so many other good qualities themselves. Some of them even were like just abusing Cinderhulk. They had like push-up bras, and some men don't know the difference between when that's the top of a breast and when that's just like the part that leads into the goods. They don't know what's going on, okay? None of them had great asses anyway. None of them had to get... And so they were also like... They were literally wearing like these cinched up dresses. They had corsets on. And so as a result, he had to go into the toilet and he had to get a few pieces of tissue paper, and he had to just shore up his assets, and he had to go for. That's how he was going to win this tournament, and he did. So congratulations to him and Kate Upton for being exceptional in that one particular quality, but didn't necessarily still show us all that much of the rest. What do you think?
I will say that when I was watching the Fnatic series until Game 5, and just kind of over the course of the group stage, that I thought for a second, I was like, oh my god, is Reignover the best jungler at this tournament?
Yeah. In short, this tournament can be summed up with a TLDW of tits or get the fuck out. That was this tournament, okay, in the tank meta. By the way, can I just ask you this question before I end? A lot of people like it right now, but I actually think this Cinderhulk meta fucking sucks. Not even for the top laners. The top laners, it unfortunately makes them too strong when they just use the Cinderhulk and get the Gromp all the time. It's the junglers that it ruins to me. Like, look at that stat where something like 94% of the games in this tournament was just Cinderhulk chosen. The whole point of those jungle items was to add massive diversity that didn't exist before, so all these champions would be viable, and it would be more about... The idea before was that every jungle style would become viable, because then people who wanted to duel could do it, then people who wanted to gank could do it, then people who wanted to farm. Instead, you don't see anyone on these like devourer champions in general, for the most part,
The problem is that the Cinderhulk empowers tank items, and every single stat in this game is attributed to a gold cost. So if you think that I pay 3,800 to go and buy an Infinity Edge and that gives me X amount of stats, then that's how you equate that. And right now, it's like not only that Cinderhulk is super cost efficient, the stats that it's giving you, but then it also applies and makes your tank stats even more valuable. So you can amass these massive amounts of health and resistances for incredibly cheap, and then like have all that. I saved so much money, so now I can buy this one damage item and kill everyone. Like it's just a cost efficiency thing, and the professionals will always find that's the job of a professional. You're supposed to abuse
the thing that's the best. Yeah. Okay. So, do you have any final words on this tournament for anyone?
Clear Love beat SKT in a game best of 5.
Asterisk. Anyway, I won't mention the asterisk. We already know what it is. So, if anyone wants to see, by the way, Froskurinn break this game down, wasn't it after the final that you broke down that thing in that interview for Fragbite?
No, he actually interviewed me before the final.
Okay, so if you want to see Froskurinn's thought, here's a test for you guys. Go watch her thoughts before the final and see how it played out. See, match it up. Did she have some good analysis? Did she have some good points going into it? There's an on-camera interview from Froskurinn here, so no pressure, but let's see how it all turned out, and that's the end.